Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our revamped Checking Line podcast. My name is Hannah Beavis, and I'll be your moderator tonight. I joined the Checking Line this year, and so I've been writing for about 8 months. And joining me tonight is Cheryl Adams, our head writer for the site. Cheryl, if you want to introduce yourself a little.
Hi, this is Cheryl, and I've been writing for the Checking Line for a few seasons now, and we've got a couple of great ladies that are making up our team this year. So, thank you.
All right, so tonight, this is our first podcast in a while, so we're just going to talk about some of the recent things that have happened. First thing that we wanted to talk about was the Stadium Series on, I think, a week and a half ago on Friday. Obviously, the Hawks had a victory with 5-1, a dominant victory over the Penguins. And Cheryl, I know you were there, so if you wanted to talk a little bit about what the atmosphere was like. I mean, watching it from TV, it looked incredible, and I wished I could be there.
It was a great atmosphere. I had gone to the Winter Classic this winter as well. And so the thing that I took away as part of the fans sitting in the stadium from the Winter Classic was that the atmosphere was not tense. It was everybody's out having a great time, big party, even though it was a rivalry that the fans were just going to have fun together. And I think the same thing was very true about the Stadium Series, in that there's not really a lot of what we would think is historical rivalry between the Penguins and the Blackhawks, but certainly everybody talks about both teams because they're both so good, so consistent over the past couple of years, so, getting through the playoffs, being a couple cups won between both of them over the past several years, and so the fans just treat each other well. We're out to have a good time. We're all freezing our butt off there together in the cold weather, and it was just a great time. So I left a little early, I will admit that, because I was just soaked and frozen. And once you're soaking wet in 15-degree temperatures and there's no place to really warm up, then you're just going to be miserable for the rest of the game.
Definitely.
And, sacrifice the third period in the favor of not catching pneumonia or frostbite. But yeah, overall it's a great experience, and I can only imagine, what it must have felt like to be a player out in those kind of circumstances, and in any of these outdoor games, really. Time of a lifetime, I guess.
Yeah. And then also with this game too, was Teuvo and Crosby first regular season? Was it their first meeting at all in the NHL?
Yes, that was an interesting point, and I'm glad that they didn't overly hype it leading up to the game, although certainly fans had talked about it. They've both been in the league for 7 years, and Crosby had played against Chicago in his rookie year, and I think in his sophomore year in the league. And then, oddly enough, he's been injured for just about every game. Played against Chicago, so it became this, especially among Chicago fans, this joke that Crosby doesn't want to play Taves, Chicago flu, and it's just how it turned out. So I would say if the question of the game was Crosby versus Taves, Taves won this round, but we'll see how it goes. I think that these two teams can build up a good rivalry since they'll now see each other twice a year.
Definitely, and I like that about the new schedule, that you get to see more of these Eastern teams more, especially even though the West is good. You've got teams like the Penguins and the Bruins and now the Canadiens and even the Lightning they've been doing really well this year. And so seeing them more often, I think it's a great thing, especially with the Taves and Crosby, maybe Taves and Stamkos or other rivalries getting built up too.
Absolutely. It's for the good of the league as a whole, because there's the way the schedules have worked out in the past few years, that there'd be times that you'd only see another conference's team once a year, and it wouldn't necessarily be in your own building.
Yeah.
So, the league spends a lot of time and effort building up the marketing presence of players like Crosby, Ovechkin, and so on and so forth. And then if the team doesn't come to your building, then you're like, well, I'd really like to see so-and-so play. And you don't get the chance. So this time, everybody's seen everybody home and away. I really think that there's nothing to lose in that. And I think when you look at the wild card standings, how they are right now, in terms of competition for the wild card spots, I think that the new division/conference layouts look pretty healthy, I think, for some new blood in the conference playoffs and so forth. So I think everything about it right now is looking pretty good.
Oh yeah. And then looking at the playoff spots right now, I think if we were to start today, we'd be playing the Avalanche. But between the Blues, the Hawks, and the Avalanche, that's a pretty tight race right now to see who's going to get that top spot, who's going to play that last wild card, because whoever doesn't is going to end up playing that division rival. And so it's very possible that, a cup contender or the defender of the cup in Chicago or a contender like the Avs or the Blues could get knocked out in that first round of the playoffs just because the Central Division, or the way that the layout is so tight and so tough.
The Central Division has turned out to be, once again, pretty strong. So we not only have the top three in the Central, but we also have both wild cards right now that are Central teams, Minnesota and Dallas. Phoenix is trailing by only 1 point, but they've got one game over Dallas. So this, I think the eighth, what we think give us the eighth in the West, but the second wild card is probably going to be the tight race. It's probably going to come down to Dallas or Phoenix. Now, certainly Winnipeg or Vancouver could potentially make up enough points.
I don't know about Vancouver right now.
I know. Did you see the game last night? It was just like, oh wow, they're 3-0 against. What is happening? It was the craziest third period I can ever recall seeing, and I'm just in shock. I'm in shock and awe, honestly, between Vancouver 2010, 2011, 2012, and now, it's only been 2 seasons.
I'm thinking back to the 2011 playoffs when that was just the most intense. There was crazy, and they were so talented and stacked, and they had won the President's Trophy again, and they were the team to beat. And just the fact that they've just spiraled in the last 2 or 3 years, and it just seems to be getting worse. I don't see any turnaround for them.
Now, granted, they had a lot of injuries over the past few years, and I think that the goalie controversy sucked some life out, even though, I think the players dealt with it as gracefully as they could, and so on and so forth. But, I think that having something like that festering in the back of people's minds in the locker room it's not the healthiest thing to operate under. I don't think Tortorella is the best coach for the players that exist on that team. He clearly seems to be trying to work on a different style to go with that, but clearly it's not working at the best it should. But I can't be Mike Gillis. I can't recommend what should be done over there.
No.
I would like to see Kevin Dineen get a shot at coaching the Canucks. I think he'd be a good fit, but that's just my point there.
I think it's agreed right now that something needs to change, but what that something might be is up for debate.
I feel it just feels kind of sad that there's not going to be the same Canucks rivalry that there's been. There's just been so many changes on the team and the way that Vancouver has been playing. It feels kind of sad.
It's very sad because it was a good rivalry. It was excellent, and now it's like I can't even hate the Canucks anymore. I just feel bad for them.
I think we're seeing a lot of that sentiment on Twitter right now. So.
Yeah.
It's nice that Luongo got to go to Florida, though, because I think for him it's healthy and it's good that he's going to be at a team where he's really wanted and appreciated for bringing what he can to the table.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for Eddie Lack right now because he's basically being thrown into the fire.
Exactly.
Gordon Schneider got put in a good position over New Jersey where, he's going to be number one. It's a little messy right now this year.
Eventually.
Rogers clearly not quite ready to give up things, but that's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah.
So it's that was a pretty interesting trade deadline this year.
Definitely.
To say the least.
There were a lot of goalie moves along that. I didn't see Luongo going at all, but Halak was moved, and then Thomas going to Dallas, and just all over the league people were going back and forth. But Bowman didn't really do that much for the Hawks. He added David Rundblad and Peter Regan, and then Pierre-Marc Bouchard, and I believe another prospect whose name, I'm not quite sure who it is.
We got Barbara as a goalie. He was sent pretty much straight to Rockford.
Yeah.
I think he had like maybe one game he sat as a backup or something, if I recall. But Blackhawks are pretty close up to the cap right now. Trying to pull up the cap sheet to get a look at it. There's a little slow. So it's interesting to see the moves that Stan made, and there's still the question mark second center. Here he got sent away, of course.
Yeah.
And best of luck to him, because I think he'll have the room to succeed in Florida, and there just isn't the room on the Blackhawks for him. And people say, well, what about Hanzus and so on and so forth? But clearly,
I don't think Hanzus is a long-term solution for the second line center.
Yeah, clearly / Merkley, he's still being used as second center, and it's not working as it did last year, but who knows?
I mean, it worked for the playoffs last year, and for that short period of time, he was a great pickup at the deadline. And so with Peter Regan, I thought that was he's younger, obviously, than Hanzus, but I think they're hoping that's a similar thing. But with Teravainen potentially coming over from the Finnish league after they're out of the playoffs, so I guess you have to cheer for whoever's playing against them to get him over here as fast as we can. Maybe see him slotted in there, although I'm not sure how it'll look if we just throw him right in there, how he's going to adapt to the NHL ice right away, or playing with Kane, how that's going to work.
Well, the thing is that they wouldn't have to rely on him. The best part is that Chicago is in a very comfortable position for being top 3 in the Central. I don't see them plummeting out the standings.
No.
It would be surprising, to say the least. Right now, the Liga goes into playoffs this Saturday, so the first 2 games of the 3-card wild card is Saturday and Sunday, and then third game required is Tuesday. And then the quarterfinals start up later in the week. So the very soonest that we could see Teravainen, that Joker could end their series and Teravainen could come over would be Monday or Tuesday if they got knocked out in 2 games with whoever they match up with, assuming that they're in a wild card position and not in top 6 position, because Liga's playoff is a little different structure than NHL structure. So if Joker finishes in the top 6, they have an automatic bye to the second round, and therefore we won't know anything until close to the end of the month. So a lot's going to depend on how Joker does, not only in the final game, which will determine their standings heading into the playoffs, but also as the playoffs open up. And I haven't followed them super closely this year, so I don't know what their chances are in terms of once they hit the playoffs. So, yeah.
Something else I wanted to talk to you about, also circling back to the second line center issue that's still not really resolved, is a lot of people have been talking about Teravainen potentially being that long-term solution once we get him in the league and he has time to adapt. And obviously, again, like you said, the Hawks are in a good position where we don't need to throw him in and say, we need you to work right now. So he's a potential solution. But around the trade deadline, some people were talking about maybe, I don't know how much credibility this has, Kessler requesting a trade out of Vancouver, and how he and Kane played together at the Olympics and really enjoyed it, that Kane was maybe talking about, hey, if there's any way Kessler could come over here, that would be great. But really, for someone as good as Kessler, you'd almost have to include Teravainen in a package to get him over here. So is there really it's almost like you've got to pick, do you want Teravainen or Kessler as your second line center, or do you think that's even a possibility at this point?
I honestly can't see Stan Bowman trading away Teravainen without getting a good look at him on the ice. I think somebody else with a similar cap hit would have gone back to Vancouver in return, and probably some prospects out of the system. I thought it was interesting that Peary moved, but Warren didn't, which might indicate that, Blackhawks are willing to see how he looks through the playoffs before they decide they want to let him walk or trade him. right now, looking at Cap Geek, see, here's the interesting thing about everybody salivating about Teravainen coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Teravainen still has to get paid.
Yes, he does.
He still has some salary, and right now, the cap space for Blackhawks is a mere squeak of $52,000.
Oh my God.
So that's what you call barely breathing.
And there's still a couple people who need to get re-signed going into the summer, right?
Exactly. So, understandably, there's a lot of fans who are out there busy panicking because, like, oh my God, Kane and Taves. So, thankfully, Kane and Taves still have one more year of their current contract cap hit, and then their UFAs starting 2 seasons from now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Stan will get something done. I'm sure it's also going to be very expensive to get something done, but cap hit next year should be going up approximately $7 million, which is a start.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully we're going to see it go up further in the following year. Excuse me. Right now, the Blackhawks have 18 players that are still under contract for next year.
Mm-hmm.
About half of those are RFAs. But you have to applaud Blackhawks' long-term insight in that they've signed some of their core players to very affordable salaries that are very long, like Marian Hossa,
mm-hmm.
under $5.3 million cap hit for many years.
It's a great deal.
Hjalmarsson's extension, he is tied up through 2018-19 for $4.1 million. There's some other ones that are question marks that is Miranda going to work out for his contract.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he's got a modified no-trade clause, so I haven't looked at the details of how that one is. But, there's some interesting... we got to look at Brandon Saad. He's definitely going to be due for a raise.
Oh, yeah.
And then, Johnny Oduya will be a UFA the year after next, so the question is, will Blackhawks keep him, trade him? Lenny's got one more year in his contract. What sort of raises he do? Michael Rosenthal still has a year on his contract, but they could always trade him away.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain players they could also do. Like, I don't know trade deadline versus buying out a player. So, like, for example, if Teravainen comes over and they want to play him, in order to make space, they can no longer bury a player in the AHL.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are going, oh, well, the Blackhawks are going to bury so-and-so in the AHL if Teravainen comes over. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The team still has to be on the hook for some of the money. So the question is, who or how are they going to handle affording to put Teravainen in the playoffs? So,
mm-hmm.
That's a question of, will he come over and get a few games in Rockford until they can call up the Black Aces and
mm-hmm.
so on and so forth? So I think there's still a lot of question marks out there about what we're going to see, although the team sounds very confident about the fact he's going to come over.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is mainly when and how is that going to affect cap space and who or, how they're going to handle it. So
mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah, and that's something where we just are going to have to wait until he comes and we can get a look at him actually on the ice with the team before we can really make any solid judgments about what's going to happen with that.
Absolutely. I'm just as excited as the next person to see this kid come over, especially after he has just been in beast mode after the World Juniors. So I think it's very exciting prospect, and I don't want people to get mistaken about that when I tweet about it and put a little word of caution in there. But I also think that you have to say he's not played with any of these guys. He had a couple of games in preseason, and he had camp with them, but that's not the same as this point in the season, how the NHL level and intensity is different than SM League. I'm not saying that
mm-hmm.
Finnish League is like worse when it comes to playoffs. I'm sure they're just as intense, just as fast, but there's definitely going to be an adjustment,
mm-hmm.
size of ice, speed of game, et cetera, and I think that there's a section of the fan base that honestly feels he's like the Messiah or something over the way they talk about him. So You know, I'm enthusiastic, but I'm just waiting to see. I'm not going to fall into like crazy praising him about, you know, everything before he comes over here and lands, because I think fans have certainly built up expectations of players before and they've fallen through. So
yeah,
let's be realists about it. You know, why not? So I know it's not as fun.
There's definitely a hype, but we'll see what happens when he gets here.
He certainly looks exciting, though. I think Stan Bowman just robbed that year's draft. No doubt about it. We'll see.
Definitely. Looking ahead to the Hawks' schedule for this week, they've got a couple games against their Central Division. They've got the Avs tomorrow night on Wednesday, and then the Preds on Friday, and then the Red Wings on Sunday, which isn't a division anymore, but it's still going to be an exciting game. What do you think with the two division games? That's definitely something where they're going to be looking for 2 points to keep moving up the standings in the Central. What do you think is going to be something that we should keep an eye out for, that they need to do well in those games?
I think the Avs game is going to be particularly important because there is a pretty high likelihood at this point that this will be a first-round opponent. Mm-hmm. So the Blackhawks have to prove to themselves that they can beat the Avalanche, because if they go into the playoffs and that's the first round opponent and they think, we can't beat these guys, it might work against them mentally. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important for them to simply play a simple game, as Coach Q likes to preach, and just work and get it done, and feel that they had a really confident, really good game in Colorado, and to take away, no matter how the game comes out, but ideally with a win, and just feel very confident and good about the game that they played, so that, you know, even if they do end up as a first-round opponent, that it's not as intimidating, I think would be a word. You wouldn't hear the players say that, but I think that from my viewpoint as, you know, competitor, that I would feel it's more intimidating. Mm-hmm. The other thing is Nashville's still a Central Division rival, so you definitely want to get points out of them, because Nashville is a bubble team at this point, and Chicago faces them 3 times before the end of the season. So they definitely want to take as many points out of that as they can. And then Detroit being an Eastern team, let's get all the points we can out of them, because it's not the 4-point swing of Central teams. So I think all in all, there's the Blackhawks should have every reason to get up and show up for every single game that they're playing between now and the end of the season. Every point's important.
Definitely. With the Nashville game, too, you've got Pekka Rinne coming back finally after, and he's been back for a little bit, after that injury that's sidelined him for so long of the season. And the Blackhawks seem to have trouble with Pekka Rinne whenever he's in net. Seems to be a little, well, he's spectacular, so it's difficult to score against him anyways.
Yeah, there's a game going on right now in Buffalo between the Sabres and the Predators, and the Predators are playing their style of hockey. So it's low-scoring, tight defense, you know. And, we'll look for more of the same with all the games versus them at the end of the season. Actually, I just looked at the score. 3-1 Nashville, so they're doing all right tonight. And I think Nashville's real happy to have Pekka back. And I think we'll probably see Carter Hutton for at least one game between now and the end of the season, because one of the games in Chicago, because I think they would like to give him, he's earned it against his old team. Whether that'll be Friday or another game down the schedule, we'll see. But the Predators are definitely want to claw their way into the playoff position, so they are not going to give anything up on Friday. Should be a good lot of good games this week, I think. I hope.
Definitely.
Definitely do not want to see another. What game was it? The Buffalo game. I think they could have done more in that game. But,
on Sunday.
Yeah.
That was a very close game against a team where it shouldn't have been very close. No.
I think Buffalo, though, was feeling a little re-energized by some of the trades. Ryan Miller. Oh, my goodness. Him going to the Blues.
I was not happy.
Yeah, that just made the Blues a whole lot tougher for the Central. I think the Blues showed that, if they show up, that, they can cause trouble for a good team, and the Blackhawks have to be careful not to take any nights off against teams that they might feel are, this team's out of the playoffs. Yeah, they can still cause you trouble, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Take points away from you. So I hate seeing that, and especially in this stretch to the playoffs, to see Blackhawks play a game where it's like, come on, guys. I know. You're looking at the team and they're like, they suck, but, and that's what we think too. But in that case, you should be walking all over them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel abashed about wiping out your opponent 10-1.
Yeah.
Easy to say that as a fan versus being the coach, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Looking at the Blues, some of their stats today was checking out how they're doing against the Central. They haven't lost a single game in regulation against a single team in the Central, which means they're 18-0-1, which means if that's a matchup in the playoffs, that is something where I think we might have 2 games left against them on the schedule, where those games are going to be really critical to see how we play against them, should that be a matchup.
That's another one important too. Both the Blues and the Avs have given Chicago a lot of trouble this season, and they've been a lot of close games that the Blackhawks have got to prove they can win against both of those teams before the season's up, so that they can feel, matching up against them, whether it's the first round, second round, third round, that they're going to come out with a win, and not like, oh goodness, we're fighting a pill for this battle. But I feel confident that I don't think there's any reason the Blackhawks can't beat either of these teams. Mm-hmm. It's all about the 60-minute effort, and I don't know. The Blackhawks actually beat anybody in overtime / not beat shootout at this point. I think they're still at the no answer to that question, and that's something else I hope to see an answer for before they hit the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But if they want to say, well, their overtime wins for playoffs, that's going to be.
And again, with the playoffs, they'll have longer overtime, so maybe, hopefully, by the time that rolls around, they'll have figured things out and be able to put ones like that away, should it happen in the playoffs.
Right. That's a good point, that it's legitimate overtime is not just, pity point overtime. So 5 minutes going to the shootout. It's legitimate full-on overtime. So
winner takes all.
That's right. Oh goodness, it's going to be pretty exciting playoffs, I think. This year, no matter what, it's a really good race in the West, and I think that whoever comes out of the West is going to beat whoever comes out of the East.
I would agree with that at this point.
So we'll see, but that's just the gut feeling.
Also, looking at some of the games that happened the other night, I think you saw what happened to Rich Peverley in Dallas with that scary situation where he collapsed on the bench, and he's okay now, but something like that happening just kind of reminds you that hockey, while it's exciting and fun, is really very demanding, and hopefully he's okay and he'll be fine, but that was scary.
The reports have been good so far that I've seen on Twitter today. It is kind of weird that there's been not a lot, we think, fortunately, but there's been several incidents this season, like Chris LeFlanning having a stroke. Mm-hmm. He's in his mid-20s, young, healthy guy. Rich Peverley, about 30, young, healthy guy. I don't think the percentages are any different than the general American population, but it just shows, how fragile we can be, and that, even as incredibly healthy as these guys are, that it can happen to you. Mm-hmm. So I think that the NHL should be applauded on one side for the fact that they've got the protocols in place that help these guys be saved, because they have medical staff right there now. On the other hand, I was just discussing this on Twitter a little earlier. There's certainly things that the NHL safety protocols still have to continue to work out and improve on, like concussion protocols, and how players, like, for example, what I cited on Twitter is if a player gets hit hard enough that they're laying on the ice for several minutes, and it's a question of do you possibly have a concussion or another injury, that they should leave the game. Honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I did mention, the hit on Mike Smith from Andrew Shaw, I think it was 2 seasons ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And, Smith gets up and plays after being on the ice for like 5 minutes and finishes out the game and is apparently fine. And yet, from looking at the game, you're like, oh God, is he dead?
Yeah.
So,
and
if that's the question, maybe he should go take a rest for the rest of the game. That's what we have a backup goalie for. And the GMs address this as well, because they feel that, goaltender interference, blah, 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 blah. We remember Ryan Miller complaining about the hit in Buffalo. It's a thing that, you don't... There's a certain amount of theatrics, and you want to be able to pull penalty and et cetera,
mm-hmm.
but it's also really unfair if goalies get away with a little bit too much theatrics,
mm-hmm.
And negates a goal or get a power play in their favor or whatever. So I hate it when they bring up words like pace and because I think hockey has got plenty of great pace regardless. And
mm-hmm.
in watching this Predators Buffalo game tonight, actually a fight broke out, and all I could think was, my goodness, I'm bored, get back to playing. So I think if the NHL went to an eliminate fighting rule, I'd be okay with that too. Because, we've seen, like, from Brandon Bollig, that a person, and from Matt Cook and some other players who made their living as a pugilist or tough, rough player, people can change and they can improve and they
mm-hmm.
can be a decent player and make a contribution to the roster without their fists. So I know there's people who are very pro-fighting, but I don't know. What's your feeling on that one?
Well, and we've seen with Bollig, too, he's definitely improved this year. He scored quite a few goals, and he's gone from just being that strictly the replacement for John Scott, go out, take a 5-minute major, grab some bench for the rest of the game, and then with Matt Cook as well, they can contribute. And I was reading on Twitter today a little bit about that, the taking the fighting out of the game, and I think it was Ken Dryden had said a while ago that we've seen an NHL without fighting, and people wouldn't go away with it. They would gravitate more towards it, because we see it in the playoffs every year. Because teams don't want to put their big tough guys out on the ice on games that really matter, where a fighting penalty that sends one of your players to the box, or that instigator penalty that could leave your team shorthanded, could end up being the deciding factor in a game with so much heightened importance. So we can.
Oops, sorry.
So we've seen it without fighting, and it's not sending people away; it's bringing more people towards the game. It's good for it.
Exactly, and aren't those the best games of the year, the playoff games? And people were making some jokes on Twitter today about, well, that player's going to take a seat during the playoffs, ha ha ha. And it's like, why would they? They've changed their game, and for example, the Blackhawks' fourth line has become incredibly reliable. And somebody was saying on Twitter the other night, it's more like their third line than their fourth line these days, because of the minutes they play and the responsibilities they're given. Mm-hmm. And there's some fans that just can't let go of, making fun of some players. And I was having a discussion with somebody today, and they said maybe it is the fans' frustrations with the way Q runs some things about the team, and it's all landing on this particular player, not through any fault of his own, but because that's just what it boils down to, that he's attracted the fans' attention for whatever reason. And, you look at the other people on the team, and like Bickle, for example, got into this new contract, very good contract, and unless he shows up in the playoffs and showed off the player that he was last year, fans are making remarkably little noise about how come we're not seeing that. He's been very inconsistent this season. So, I think there's always a scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fighting is an easy thing to point at. And I think that you're totally right that, playoff hockey shows it's totally possible. Olympic hockey, they don't allow fighting in international games. I don't see anybody turning away from Olympic hockey either, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I think that's definitely how things might start heading in that direction sooner rather than later, as much as Gary Bettman wants to claim that people still aren't fighting in games, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I think it's going to happen eventually, especially with all the new medical information and players are getting hurt, and now we have more information and the after effects of what might happen. I think it's going to eventually leave or at least decline. But how long it might take to do that and how many people kicking and screaming will be fighting for it till the end, quite literally, remains to be seen. But I think that pretty much wraps up everything that we wanted to talk about. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to our newest podcast. You can find more of our writings on thecheckinline.com, where you can find myself, Hannah, Cheryl, and then two of our other writers who couldn't make it tonight, Maggie and Ellie. We have recaps, we have analysis pieces, we have previews. You can come and check us out. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions for a future podcast, tweet at us. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening and rating.